It's time for the CakeDrain Show with Drake and Cain.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the CakeDrain Show! Video games are an amazing thing, but sometimes they make sequels that are not so amazing. Now, I know we try to stay positive here on CakeDrain on the channel, but today there's just something we need to talk about, and we're going to try to talk about it in the most positive way possible.
Even it out.
That is disappointing video game sequels. We've got a big sequel coming up. Doom, the much anticipated game. It's no longer Doom 4, it's like just Doom. I guess they're rebooting it again. And a lot of people are excited for it. I'm one of those people, but a lot of people also speculate that this game is going to fail to meet expectations, especially since it's been so long since we've had one. And we've seen things like this in the past, like with the Duke Nukem Forever game, which was much anticipated, and it kind of flopped. So today we're going to talk about some that we know personally, and I'm going to let Drake start it off.
Alright guys, now I'm going to give you guys a little forewarning. D-Rock's going to like my list, because I play a lot of wrestling games, but these are kind of ones that I didn't think met to the hype that was brought onto them. First one I want to bring up is SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, and more specifically for the Wii console. This was the first wrestling game that I can recall using the Wii controls as their advertising tool. Like, you can be part of the action. And honestly, the controls on it, what made it rough was the controls didn't really help a lot. They were kind of confusing because you had buttons to push and moves to do and things like that. I mean, you moved your hands a lot and your arms, but besides that, you weren't really in the match as much. The Road to WrestleMania, although always really interesting, didn't quite have the kind of story that would go along with other SmackDown vs. Raw games. They kind of threw it on there and said, hey, this should work. Didn't seem as
kind
prepared.
of anticlimactic.
Yeah, it wasn't really prepared. And the last one, again, it didn't really go with the feel of the SmackDown vs. Raw games where you're in the action, you're part of it, and the Wii controls kind of took you out of it and more confusing and more cumbersome of controlling. That's my opinion on it.
Hey, bad controls can ruin a game quickly.
Very quickly.
Now, the first disappointing sequels that I want to talk about are basically all of the Red Faction sequels. If you guys remember the game for the PlayStation 2, Red Faction, awesome first-person shooter. It was one of the first to really emphasize, like, destruction physics in a game. You could, like, destroy anything, blow up things, blow holes in the side of mountains. It was awesome, and it was such a great game. But whenever the second one came out, they kind of turned it into just another shooter. They had cooler multiplayer maps and stuff, but you couldn't destroy as many things. There were only a few select destructible things in the campaign, like, oh, I can blow up this wall, I can blow up that wall, but not any of the other ones. And so they kind of took away a lot of its character. And then they rebooted the franchise with Red Faction Guerrilla and turned it into a third-person open-world game. They brought back a lot of the destruction, which was cool, but they still kind of made it into just a Mercenaries clone, but in space.
Why do people always put stuff in space?
Space makes it better, I guess.
I don't know.
And it felt kind of unnecessary. I feel like you could have done that and left it first person, maybe kept some of its character that way. And then, of course, they did a sequel to the reboot, getting, like, really confusing here, Armageddon, which was a major flop, because everybody was like, hey, we're excited for this huge game, and they basically took away everything that made Guerrilla good, which was the freedom of the open worldness, and they made just a linear game. So they screwed up Red Faction twice. Twice.
Wow. You think you learned from the first time? That would be...
You would think.
You would think so. Putting it in space and taking away blowing up stuff. I mean, come on. Blowing up stuff is part of the fun in those kind of games.
That's right.
Alright, so my next one is actually part of a really successful series for the PS2 Xbox era, and it's Showdown Legends of Wrestling. This game was really enjoyable. Again, these are games we enjoyed playing, but just didn't meet the hype and build-up that they were brought on. The matches were very limited. You basically had one-on-one, tag team, and like elimination tags. there were not a lot of specialty things. Like
No
there
cage
weren't-
matches or
There
anything?
weren't not really cage matches. There were maybe a ladder match or two, but it kind of they wanted to. It was basically like you could do the fantasy matches you wanted to see, like Bret Hart versus like a more modern superstar, or Sting versus the Ultimate Warrior. Those kind of things that you never really got to see, but. A lot of it, again, was down to limited matches. Also, the entrances were very short, very just kind of like, here's the wrestler, let's go. It's, didn't show the characters as much. And also, the sound and the commentating were kind of off. Because a lot of it, like, you'd see a punch, and then, like, a second or two later, you'd hear it. So it'd be like...
Yeah, that's bad.
And... the commentating was entertaining at times because these legendary commentators were on it, but it kind of got repetitive. Like, oh, do you remember that one time when Ricky Steamboat did da-da-da? No, I don't. Well, I do, and it's awesome. It kind of, it's one of those things where, they name off famous rivalries, but for every match that person's in. So that kind of threw me out. They didn't really get into the matches. They just kind of commentated on the wrestlers themselves. And I think that took away from the experience. So great game, but bad aspects of it.
Right. The focus was on the range of characters you could play, but not on, like, filling in gameplay gaps and making a well-rounded game. It's just like, hey, you can fight this guy and this guy.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Pretty much. That was basically the concept is like, legendary wrestler versus current wrestler, see what happens when they meet, and go. Like, we don't have an intro to why, like, there's no real story there. It's just kind of rough all around. But fun game for, a retro wrestling nerd like me. But besides that, it's kind of a fun game to pick up and play once in a while, but not a long-term game.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep. Well, my next one, kind of the same case. They're fun games, but they're disappointing sequels. And these are the Resident Evil 5 and 6. Specifically 5, because Resident Evil 4, if you've played it, is an amazing game. A lot of people consider it the best horror game ever made. That's kind of a bold statement, but it is a really, really awesome game. And Capcom failed to step up to the plate with Resident Evil 5. They changed basically the whole feel of everything and went from a really awesome, scary horror survival game and turned it into kind of a crappy third-person shooter with clunky mechanics, and it just wasn't fun because it had no... I mean, it was fun to play, but it was obnoxious to play at the same time because there was no identity. You're like, is this a horror game? Is this an action game? Because it's not doing good at either one, and it's not doing very good as a combination either. And they improved a little bit with Resident Evil 6 because they had like different campaigns, and the Leon campaign was pretty awesome because it was more classic Resident Evil, kind of scary. And but basically they've just been riding the wave of success of the name and trying to make their games good by just having really big production value and really big set pieces, but the gameplay itself, the mechanics, are obnoxious. Yeah. Obnoxious to play. And I've been disappointed with Resident Evil ever since Resident Evil 4 said goodbye, and I miss it.
That's harsh.
But you can still go back and play Resident Evil 4 and just pretend like the rest of them didn't happen.
You had, it's kind of a lot of franchises. You find that one that's like a good stopping point. Just don't even worry about what happened in between.
Exactly.
So it's a really good place to go from. So my last one, which was huge lead up to it, was WWE All-Stars. It was advertised as a different type of game because it was a little more cartoony, a little more, in your face type stuff. But they took the cartoony thing a little too far. The characters were kind of overly exaggerated. Like if they were muscular, they were super muscular, and they're super tiny waist, big, the classic cartoon style of Muscle Man. That's kind of how they were, but in 3D. It looked a little clunky. Also, it was a little too simple of controls. Yes, it's easy to pick up something that's really simple, like a 2-button combo, but after a while, punching and kicking gets repetitive. It kind of turned into an old school fighting game. Yeah, just a rock'em sock'em game where you took like the old WWE games where you do all these combos and stuff like that too. We're gonna punch and kick until the person falls over. it was very confusing in that sense. Again, no storyline in it. Like, you couldn't progress through each era. It was just kind of, you set up matches, you had matches, and then you set up the next one. Didn't give you a lot of control over that.
Gotta have a story, man.
And again, no real match variety. Again, you could do one-on-one matches and really intense type things there, but couldn't really leave the ring, couldn't really do a lot of interaction outside. So basically, you could do one-on-ones and tags, but besides that, you're kind of on your own. So it was a great game to play and really fun, but it took away the thing that made it not live up to the hype was they also came out the same year with a SmackDown vs. Raw game, which had a lot of the things people were looking for. So this was kind of a fun arcade game. If you're new to wrestling games, it's a good one to pick up, but if you're experienced and want that full experience, I would not recommend this game. But it's another fun one just to play and have a good time.
Yeah, it sounds like they kind of made it for just a simple little party game, something you play with casual friends whenever they come over, but not like a really in-depth wrestling game that you can really dive into and get a lot of hours out of. But, yeah. Well, the last one we got for you today, I know I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this because it's the internet.
Duck and cover.
Yeah, literally. All of the Call of Duty games, basically all of the Call of Duty games after Modern Warfare.
Ouch.
And I'm saying that these are disappointing because they're kind of just the same game. And this is, a lot of gamers will agree with me. They're kind of just the same game with a new coat of paint every single time. Modern Warfare was the last one, in my opinion, to really change the game up and take it from a World War II shooter, which I love the old Call of Duties 1, 2, and 3. They were awesome. Awesome World War II games. And then Modern Warfare, it was cool too because it took those good mechanics that Call of Duty kind of pioneered and put it in a modern situation. But then after that, it was kind of just the same thing. It's like, oh, hey, we're going to add a smartphone. Or, hey, we're going to add zombies. Or we're going to add parkour. I'm like, it's just fluff. It's just little gimmicks to try and get you to buy the next title. And not really going in there and trying to flesh out a bigger or more interesting, in-depth game. The stories are always kind of stereotypical and boring. And they serve as just tutorials for the online. And so, I'm kind of disappointed with Call of Duty. Yeah. Haven't really looked forward to a Call of Duty game since probably World at War. And that wasn't even one of the best ones.
See, that's the thing. You know, you gotta have a good game that is good to play solo and online or multiplayer. You know, because that's kind of what all these covered was you need a good long-term game that can hold your interest by yourself, but also you can play with friends and have fun with them as well. So hopefully you guys had fun with us today going over this. Hopefully we weren't too harsh on these. If you guys have any games that perhaps were hyped too far and you're really excited and then kind of let down, let us know. We're trying not to be too negative. And also, if you guys liked any of these games, we enjoyed these games. It's just didn't quite meet what we thought. Let us know in the comments as well because we love to hear from you guys.
Oh yeah, we thrive off of your input.
That's right. Make sure you guys also check out my channel, Drake the True Snake, where I'll be doing all kind of behind-the-scenes stuff for CakeDrain. Exclusives! And much, much more. Also, our friend D-Rock at Wrestling Talk 1, where he talks all things pro wrestling. If you liked my list, you'll like what he talks about. Also, at The Real D-Rock 1, where all things vlogging and just whatever's on his mind he'll talk about. Which he's actually a really interesting guy to listen to, so
oh yeah,
check him out. So we will see you guys next time.
Peace
out, and remember,
BRUUUUUCE!
That was fun.
Shazam Bam Bizzle, my nizzle.
Maybe we should be like CakeDrain Arcadia.